and there would be lines around the block. I remember that I was exposed to that. Um, at the same time, getting money was always impressed upon me by my immediate surroundings. Because it was either you had or you didn't. The haves and have-nots. When I think about it, that became uh, a metaphor for many things in my life, the haves and the have-nots, because that same mentality is very much present when you're in prison.
Nigga,
On
you
a
have to.
thousand.
Fire.
Full
See,
blast.
I got shit. Food stamps.
So,
I be having shit up my sleeves.
you learn how to
This one,
how to do
and the last one you had.
what to take, so that you can have.
Which one? The last one. The speaker
Well,
joint?
The one that you played
So
before,
yeah, like I
before
said, I
this
grew up
one.
on the
Mario,
east
Yeah,
side.
the Mario joint.
To me, it was
It'll go
regular
hand in
shit,
hand.
but
Yeah, that's a fact.
Go hand in hand. West Haven, how you
I'm
doing?
grateful for the things that I seen early on and being exposed to in my life, because they preconditioned me in a lot of ways to deal with what would come. Which was at some point in time, I would eventually, due to the lifestyle choices that I made, would wind up in prison. And in fact, I did. I wound up in prison for a very long time.
Now,
That's a good question. And I think, honestly, one of the things when I look back that affected
Nigga
me
sound like
the
food
most in terms of how I dealt with people throughout all my years of incarceration was definitely influenced by the fact that growing up on the Lower East Side, at that moment, it was such a mixing pot. I remember that. I remember the Lower East Side that's what made the Lower East Side so different in a sense from the rest.
What I asked that nigga.
now, with that being said about Alphabet City, Baruch houses, the Lower East Side, period. A lot of people know it for Delancey Street, shopping, things of that nature. What nationality set the temperature in the Lower East Side? Meaning, you got Italians over there, you got Irish down there, you got Dominican, you got Puerto Rican. What was the nationality that set the temperature for the Lower East Side, bro?
New York City, because you can go like anywhere else in the city, a couple blocks here or there, and the demographic completely changes. I mean, now I understand things a little bit different. I read a few books, learned a few things, so I'm able to understand social trends and movements and demographics a little bit better. But at that time, of course, unbeknownst to me, my neighborhood was a mixing pot. Yeah, I would say there was definitely a lot of Latinos. But again, the Lower East Side was different, not just because it was my hood, but it wasn't like everybody was secular. It was definitely a mixing pot in every sense of the word. I remember growing up
Italian, Greek guy, West Haven, I see you.
African Americans or blacks in the neighborhood. It was very much, that was just Uncle Joe. You know what I mean? Because we always was identified more with the struggle of our time, of our era. Again, grew up in the 80s in the Lower East Side. I mean, you're surrounded by abandoned buildings, open drug markets, pimps, hustlers, drug dealers, murderers, killers. I mean, these were things that you identify with every day. In addition to the rampant homelessness and poverty and the lack of education and opportunities, the systemic things that I'm able to understand and identify now. All those social ills, as it were very, very much present growing up in the Lower East Side. So the people in my neighborhood more identify with those things as opposed to race and color, And then, of course, you always have the haves and the have-nots, as I mentioned before. Growing up as a young kid, you're subjected to identifying with the stereotypical story about how young poor kid sees somebody driving a fancy car with the jewelry or stuff, and certainly those things were influences. But in the 80s, man, it was more about putting food on the table. It was more about handling your business in terms of feeding your family. And not that that's not the case now, but it was just more pressing socially, what was happening. So it just affected people in a very different way. But the Lower East Side was lit, man, always, in terms of anything that you look at. The Lower East Side was always like cutting edge in the city because you're in the middle, you're right there at the edge of Brooklyn, uptown, in between, so you get a lot of different influences in the Lower East Side, definitely.
Now, K.A., growing up, did you come from a single parent household? You said earlier, there's not too many stories out there about the Lower East Side. And what were some of the circumstances that...
It's all good.
Now, growing up on the Lower East Side. Now, my next question is, at what age did you start getting involved with the street life? What age did you start dabbling with crimes? Because, now, K.A., you explained the politics of the Lower East Side. But how old were you when you first caught your first case? And just take us back from, you said you started off committing minor crimes and you went to Spofford and juvenile hall and things of that nature. Can you kind of like paint the picture of your first trip to Spofford? What was your feelings? What was your emotions? And what was the case for?
As far back as I can remember, I was always involved in something. I mean, I'm not making excuses or blaming others. I was never that kind of kid. But definitely growing up, I just seemed to always get caught up in some shit. I was a tough little kid, man. Like, adults just couldn't just tell me anything. I was very opinionated, very, very strong in that sense. I was never a follower as a kid. My circumstances, I chose to make decisions that reflect the things that I saw in my neighborhood. Again, selling drugs, not that it's an excuse, but for me, literally coming outside my door, like there was either I seen the roles that were played and identified in my neighborhood. You had the drug addict or the user, and you had the dope boy, the drug dealer, the pusher, and I knew which way I wanted to be. You know what I mean? And then on top of that, it was also a tough era where, you had to know how to fight. And growing up from just being rough in the schoolyard and scrapping in the neighborhood to, being identified for that, you know what I mean? And being known as someone who was nice with his hands and I could fight. And then you add to that, when I was introduced to playing with guns and that changed my life, the level of excitement that I felt the first time I ever played with a gun. I was 7 years old, I'll never forget it. A crackhead came and...
Yo, bro, I don't give a fuck what you say, Hollis. You gotta post this shit, bro. This shit's too ill, bro. This shit's too fire, bro. Like, bro, this shit's fire, bro. Like, bro, yo, big bro, I don't never tell you nothing to do with your own shit, bro. Bro, this shit's fire, bro. I could kind of see why you was like keeping it in the crate, my nigga. Like, hey, bro, this shit's fire, bro.
Right, man, but I'm gonna put this shit out.
I did
this shit in 2019, bro.
Damn, 2019.
This shit's hard.
Once you put the title, the Killer of Rat Squad,
tried and convicted, found guilty.
Especially now, where everybody talking about these gang shits and the snitching with Jim Jones, 6ix9ine. This shit is gonna pop.
Homicide. I was with them dudes on the island in the early '90s when I was fighting my body and they were fighting that case. And they had offered them, I believe it was like a 2 to 6.
Yeah, nah, I believe you. I believe you, bro.
Like damn near 2 years each.
Now, West Haven, I'm gonna tap in.
They were like essentially whatever, just had to get a number, go up, get a number, and turn right back around. And they didn't take it, and they went to trial, and they wound up blowing. They both got 50 apiece. And
damn.
Years later, many years later, going from one prison to the next prison, and you meet up, and these dudes will always still continue to fight their case. Long story short, they actually were vindicated in the courts. They beat that case. So to this day, that body, that incident in which where Goho was shot and Goho and Maketumba and Landi was murdered. In that incident, to this day, that incident is unsolved, actually.
Koho, Makatumba, them niggas was Chango and T-Tone's big
Yeah,
homies.
definitely, bro. I remember the first time I landed on Rikers Island like it was yesterday. And I'm talking, what?
Yeah, Chango, yeah.
Damn near 30 years ago.
Chango.
That's how much of an impression it left on me. You know, some things you never forget. And definitely the first time I got Rikers Island, it's one of those things, one of those times. And
This first
it's
time
not
on
to say
Rikers
that,
Island was
me
never
landing on
heard,
Rikers
never
Island,
forget.
that was the very first time I was ever introduced to like an incarceration type prison jail setting. It wasn't, because unfortunately, you know, I grew up and, you know, I got into a lot of trouble as a kid, and I went through the process. Like I was introduced to the system early, so, you know, when I got locked up, there was times when you would get locked up from, you know, running around in the peas or whatever mischief, and they take you to the housing authority and call your parents, they come scoop you. You know, you get caught, you know, playing hooky or whatever, and the truant patrol, they chase you down or whatever. You know, we should do all that for fun. And, you know, then of course, you know, it moves on, and you know, I got into trouble, and eventually, then we went to the precinct, and I wound up, you know, eventually going to Spofford, and from Spofford, you had to be tough in the 80s to be in Spofford. And you know, you gotta go from there to group homes, and eventually I went upstate. So definitely I had, you know, unfortunately been introduced to the jail type setting, right? But again, Rikers Island was a different monster. I remember growing up in the Lower East Side in the late 80s, early 90s, and the individuals that I was surrounded by, you know, had been introduced to Rikers Island would come back, different people talking that Rikers Island shit. You know, I learned how to spit out a burner early. I was 11, 12 already spitting out burners, walking around with burners in my mouth. You know, and I ain't nowhere near Rikers Island. I'm only 12 years old. You know what I mean? So that's how much it conditioned me to, you know,
That's crazy.
to be prepared for what was to come on Rikers Island, the horrors that you would hear about Rikers Island. You know, so, you know, here I am. It's 1992. I'm 16 years old. Early summer in 1992, midsummer 1992, and well, my man pulled up. He was on the block. He was getting money. It was like a rainy kind of day, and he was like, "Yo, let's go to a spot." So I'm like, "All right, I mean, what you fucking with?" So he was telling me about this spot and meat packing. So I was like, all right, whatever. Back in the early 90s,
it's Chelsea.
around that time, that's when meat packing started getting
Yeah,
popular.
it's Chelsea. That's where I work by.
So it was like on the 14th Street West Side Highway. It was tucked away over there. So, you know, we get in the car, we go over there, and usually you know, we move around and we go to clubs, do some, you know, because we be getting into shit in clubs, and in the early 90s, everybody had a gun, and everybody was shooting, so, you know, that was a thing, so everywhere we went, I always had a gun with me, and, you know, I already got into shootouts in clubs, uptown, or whatever with dudes, because, you know, just in the club shit, you know what I mean, so, you know, niggas want to act stupid when they pull up in their car or whatever, and dump on them or whatever. Just, you know, it was that, you know, a lifestyle. You know what I mean? So, I don't want to glorify it, but, you know, that's what we were doing. You know, so I got a burner, and usually I got a brawl with me, or you know, we got the bouncer, the fucking DJ somewhere. We try to get it in. I mean, I've done taking guns and had chicks boof them, literally, to get them into clubs.
Damn, the boofing days.
But at this point, I wasn't able to do that. So now I'm standing there in front of this club.
Saying when I said that nigga made that
nigga, I mean, mad people.
Paste out, boofus, motherfucking phone that day. Been using that word, nigga.
Nigga boofing the phone, damn.
That's crazy.
the boys walking by. I see them.
He's key
Like, all right,
keystering the
right,
phone.
the first thing I walk around the gun.
He boofed that
So
shit.
we jump out.
Yo.
So I'm on the line, I'm telling the son, I'm like, yo, security is looking different. Them dudes don't look like they security from the hood. You know what I mean? Them dudes look like, you know, they looking different. They got the earpieces, they like, so I'm like, alright, but it's a lot of people. So I'm like, yo, I'm definitely gonna see one of these girls from around from the block. I'm just gonna pull her up and be like, yo, come here, and help me get this in. So then I'm standing there, and that's what I'm waiting for. So, motherfucking, I'm there, I'm talking to my man, whatever. So, sure enough, I start seeing a couple people from the block. I mean, but at the same time, I'm seeing other people. You know what I mean? And it's like a show. Before you get in the club, it's packed in the front. You know, motherfuckers is walk their chest out, all type of shit, bros, everything. You know what I mean? So, the police are starting to move funny in front of the crowd, and then it's like this. The meatpacking district in the early 90s, you know what I mean? It's close, starting to venture into there. There's a lot of people at night times. They move funny. So I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable. So I see these girls there. So I pull her up. I'm like, yo, come here. I mean, like, yo, come here. Let me talk to you. So I'm trying to talk to this girl from the block. So I'm trying to get her to boof this gap and take him in. But she's not really trying to hear me. And as I'm talking to her, you know, there's some skirmish starts happening. There's mad people, so I still to this day don't even know what really happened. You know, so a skirmish starts, and out of nowhere, man, I turn around, and the police are like boxing the whole little section in. So I grab the chick, and I start trying to walk with her, like to walk away from, you know, the chaos, and I see the police coming. And when I turn around to go up the block, I see this cop just walking through with his gun raised, like eyes all big, and he just grabs everybody there and just tells everybody to get on the wall. I mean,
damn.
And it's just mad people. He's looking like he about to shoot any second.
God
so
damn,
the girl, she's like, oh my God. I never forgot her name was Samantha. She grabs me and she's all scared and she pulls me into the wall. I got this big gun on me and I'm like, oh my God. So when I get to the wall, there's mad people walking to the wall. So I'm trying to like blend in a little bit and reach and throw this shit because there's mad people all over the place. Yo, how when I get to, we like literally towards the front of the club, and when I'm walking towards the wall, and I got short, I try to, you know, use her shield my body with her, and the crowd, I take the gun out, and I toss it, beautiful. This motherfucker don't see nothing, the cop don't see nothing. I get it off, I throw it. The bouncer is right there. The bouncer's like, it's almost the bouncer's right there, and like he sees it, and I mean, I don't know if he was the bouncer dude, and so I'm walking, and I get on the wall, you know what I mean? I take my hat off, and I'm on the wall now, like, yeah, I'm safe. Bouncer dude comes over, calls the cop, and the cop slowly grabs the gun or whatever. He says he saw me throw it, and they grab me, they book me, throw me, put me up on the car. I'm like, yo, you didn't see me throw nothing, what you talking about? The girls beefing with the cops. I ain't know if she was holding it down. She was spazzing. Then let him go. Beefing with them, and they grabbed me, booked me up. That was that. Took me through. So it was the first time I was central bookings. Went through. It was mad, dirty, and nasty. And from the gate, dog, it was just the most dramatic thing I ever experienced in my life, in terms of like either kill or be killed, fight or flight response on 1,000. You know what I mean? And I remember, you know, sitting there in central bookings because you all jacked up and it's mad dirty, and it's like I met this kid there, actually, a kid from Harlem. I don't remember his name. A Spanish kid, good looking dude. And we in the bookings, and you know, the motherfuckers is nervous, you young, you on the island, you know, you heard all these stories and shit. So, but I had a bit of advantage in that. Like I said, I already had my older cousins and everything have been coming through and all that. So I heard all the stories about Rikers Island and stuff from my dudes. I know niggas that got their face cut when they came from Rikers Island. We used to talk about how they cut faces and all that. So for the phone and all that, for clothes and jewels, like all that. So I was already ready for that shit. So when I was a kid, one thing I used to do all the time was I would always take Gemstar burners, and I would take them shits and I would brand new and I would put them in black tape, and all my jeans, I would take them in the waistband. I would like cut open the lip of the jeans a little bit, and I would put the burners in it and sew it back up and leave just a little opening, so I could just rip it and pull it out. So I came through with Allen, I was gripped up. So I'm sitting in central bookings, and I know I got the shits in my pants. The thing was, I never had no stuff nothing at the time, never boofed nothing at the time. So I'm holding them there as long as I possibly
I never
can.
boofed the work.
Yo, that nigga wreck.
Nigga keistered the work, nigga.
So I'm on super
Magnum
on
days,
edge with everything.
you had
So I see this
shit.
kid and him start talking, niggas is all shackled up and all that. So we get through central bookings, now we going to Allen. So I'm talking to the boy, I'm like, yeah, what's up, I'm talking, and he's like, we both wondering what to expect or whatever, and I'm thinking, alright, everybody wanna go through this situation with somebody, you know what I mean? If it's a new situation, it's a scary situation, you know what I mean? You don't know how to deal with it, you know what I mean? And
That
you're
nigga
not
moved
scared, but you
there.
don't know what you're gonna do, you know what I mean? So, I'm talking with this kid thinking everything gonna be good, so we go